Now we're recording.
Well, I'll start back now after I got married. Clara and I bought that first house, and Janice and Dell was about 2, so Janice would have about been 4. They got into Clara's lipstick, and Janice painted Dell up with that lipstick, and I took movies of it. I still have them on the movies. And he was painted from the top of his head, everything that you could see. She had lipstick painted on him. Oh, he was a sight. And then she painted herself all she could. So they were a mess to clean up.
Was Clara upset at all?
Oh, no, not.
Didn't.
She just was. I don't know. She wasn't angry at him.
No.
She took quite a project to clean them up. But, that was one of the fun times we had over that. And, but I bought a 1952 red Buick convertible, the Roadmaster, the biggest Buick they made. After I bought 3 Studebakers in a row. I bought a 48 Land Cruiser, and then I bought a 49 Chevy Studebaker truck. Then in 1950 I bought a small one. I don't remember what they called it. Anyway, then the next year I bought one of those torpedo-nosed Studebaker. And then I went from that 52 into the Roadmaster Buick convertible. And by then I had the 4 girls. And so I bought them each a fancy cap to wear, and we created a sensation about everywhere we went with that convertible, because it was a beautiful car. And then these pretty kids all dolled out. And then Clara and I had a similar outfit, so we did a lot of traveling around Whittier with that, and we'd go down to the beach. The kids loved the beach. We'd go down and swim in the edge of the ocean and then play on the beach. So we had a lot of fun with that. I imagine each of those girls can remember that. Then the 52 Buick, 1953 Buick came out with what they called the Skylark. Then was a completely different automobile. The doors were cut down low, and it was the fanciest car that Buick made. So I bought one of those, and we did the same thing with that. We traveled all over. And it had electric windows on it. And by that time, Dell was about Dell was born in 53, so he'd have been going on 3 years old. And we made a trip to Star Valley with my mother and Dell and I. Clara stayed home with the girls because I was on business, but I took Dell with me. And to entertain him on the way, I told him, I says, if you'll take your hand out and raise it up, the window will go up. And if you go down, the window will go down. So I sat there with my finger on the control button, and I'd look over, I'd see him raise his hand, and I'd make the window go up and go down. And he just had a great time with that. So when we got to Newell's in Afton, he went in and got Newell by the hand and says, come see, I'm magic. And he took him out and stood on the outside the car and raised his hand and up and down, and the window didn't go up and down. And boy, that disturbed him. He just couldn't understand how come he wasn't able to do it like he was when we were riding in the car. So I had to take him and show him what I had done. So he then understood what was happening, but he thought, boy, he was really magic. That was one of the fun things I had. But when Dell was, he was born in April. So when he was 6 months old anyway, we went back to Star Valley. My niece, Newell's daughter, Patsy, was getting married. So we went to the wedding, and we took Dell, and everybody said what a beautiful girl he was, because he had real curly hair. So my sister Martha's husband, Des Miles, had a brother, and they called him Pud. Why, I don't know, but that was all I ever knew him by, was Pud Miles. And he was a barber. So I took Dell down and I says, I want that kid to have a boy's haircut. So he gave him a boy's haircut, and that's the last time they ever said anything about him being a girl. So that we got that behind us. But he was a good-looking kid, and I've got pictures of him dressed up in his suit, and all with me. More so all. But while I was in the lumber business then completely, and when David was a baby, he was able to walk, so he'd be probably a year and a half old. I bought the output of a big sawmill in LaBarge, Wyoming, and I had 2 trucks of my own hauling out of there, and then I hired 2 trucks to truck the lumber as they produced it to Los Angeles. And we went up there in a trailer house I had, and a big tent, and we stayed there for 2 months. And I worked helping stack the lumber and all. And I'd have to go back to Los Angeles about every 2 weeks, but I'd run the heister a lot. And David was just a little guy, and when he'd see me on that heister, if he could get away from his mother, out he'd come into the lumber yard. So I'd put him on the heister, and he'd sit there with me, and he'd sit there all day if I'd have let him, because he loved to ride on that heister. But we had a black Mexican type hat for him to keep the sun off from him, and I called him Poncho. And so he was known in the family as Poncho until he got into school, at least. So we had a good time, and Janice was there. And Janice is a lover of wildlife. And there were a lot of horny toads out in that sagebrush country there where we were. And so she'd go out in there and catch horny toads, and put them in a shoebox, and bring them back, and she kept them, and then they were her pets. And when we left there, she had to leave those horny toads, and boy, that just made her feel terrible to leave those horny toads there. You couldn't have taken them with us, so she put them back out in the desert. And the interesting thing in that sawmill, they had a well. They had a big logging pond, and they had a well that they pumped water to keep in that pond. And they had distributed it out to the cabins they had around, so they run me a line. Well, the water smelled terrible. I mean, not just bad, it smelled terrible. And so we used to go up what they called Cal Pet Oil Company, had a spring about, they were 5 miles from us. So we hauled all our water that we used in the house out of that well, or spring up at Cal Pet. But once Clara mixed Jello into that water, and it foamed like an Alka-Seltzer. I don't know what chemical there was in that water, but it was bad. To show you how bad it was, the first time my brother Art and I went into LaBarge, we went in the service station, and we needed some water to put in. We had an air cooler in the car that you filled full of water, and it was mounted on the window. So he went around to the side of the service station where there was a tap, and he started to fill a bucket full of water. And I I come around the corner, he shut it off and says, my gosh, they've got that hooked to the sewer. And that's just what it smelled like, sewer water. But it was their normal water. But they used it in the town, but we couldn't go it at all. It was terrible. But we enjoyed the time we were there at Labarge. And I bought the lumber there for, I guess, 3 years. But I never did go back and stay. I had hired somebody else to pile the lumber and do all that. Well, that was a lot of good times we had over that sawmill.
Did you ever go out to Gardner Mill? Was that ever part of the family, or was that done?
Well, Uncle Frank had the old sawmill in Afton, and I bought lumber from him whenever he'd get enough accumulated to make a semi-load. I'd go up and buy that from him. And I took it into Camas toward Blizzard's mill and have him plane it and run the patterns and things I wanted on it, and then take it on down. So that I didn't buy a lot from Uncle Frank because they just had a small sawmill and they sold it locally. So whenever he accumulated enough lumber extra, why I bought it from him. And then I did buy from a little sawmill down in the lower valley from Earl Skinner. And when he'd accumulate a semi-load, I'd buy it from him. But I'd maybe only get 2 or 3 loads a year out of each of them.
What were I remember you telling me about taking Dale with you on one of them, and you always, or whoever you had, you'd take him out for a burger or something, or a hamburger on the trips.
Yeah, well, when she mentions that, I think of David. I took him in the truck once to make a delivery, and I had a big cab over Freightliner truck, a diesel. I had a sleeper on it. And so David would go with me. He'd crawl back there and take a nap and all. And one day we had unloaded a load of lumber in Van Nuys, California, and we're coming down Van Nuys Boulevard. And we went by it was a hamburger place, and I can't think of the name of it right now. But anyway, he says, Dad, can't we get a hangamer? And that's what he called it, a hangamer. So I stopped the truck and we walked back and got a hamburger and a malt. So he was happy. When I think of David that way, I think of a trip I made to California from Heber. And I was going down to California one day, unload the lumber and stay with my mother for that day. And then the next morning I was headed for home. So we'd be gone actually for 3 days. Well, when I got to Los Angeles, one of the brokers that I did business with and lined me up loads for backhaul called me and he said, I've got a load to Boise, Idaho, if I wanted it. Well, it paid really good, so I took it. So David and I got in the truck and we loaded that load of steel and headed for Boise, Idaho. And we went up through Bishop, California, Tonopah, Nevada, Winnemucca, Nevada. And we got in Winnemucca about 10 o'clock at night, and it was midwinter and it was cold. So I got in a sleeper and made David his bed on the top of the engine and the seats. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, David crawled out and got back in with me. He said, it's cold out there. So he slept there and snuggled up with me in the sleeper. When we went in for breakfast in the restaurant, David was, I think, 4 years old at the time. I went in and ordered ham and eggs over easy with hash browns. And so he ordered the same thing. And the woman looked at me and I shook my head, yes, go ahead. So she watched and he ate everything off of that plate. When I got through, she says, I don't believe a little guy like that could eat that much food. But he sure did, and he enjoyed every mouthful of it. But anyway, we were gone a full week before I got him home. And he never made a fuss until I unloaded that load of steel the next day in Boise and left there about noon and headed for Heber. And he didn't make a fuss till we were out of Salt Lake, between Salt Lake and Heber, and he says, Dad, I'm tired of this, let's go home. And I told him we'd be home within an hour, and so we were. So that was a trip that he made. But Del went with us, not in the truck so much, but he did in the car. I took him places. I had a lot of fun. Mother, Janice will always remember my mother. When she went somewhere with us, you could always depend. You didn't have to go out to lunch. She had a lunch with her. She'd have some cheese and bread and other things so she could make a sandwich, and we always carried a cooler so we had something to drink. But we got going into Afton, and I had forgotten to buy gas for some reason. And I run out of gas about 20 miles out of Afton. And so a car came by and stopped, and I sent word to my brother Newell to bring me some gas. So we were there a couple hours, and I had Del with us and Lynn Randall, and I guess Janice. And we were going to Pat's wedding, I think is what it was. Anyway, Mother fed us while we were there. So Janice has never forgotten that. That Mother always had something in her purse to eat.
One thing, okay, go ahead. I was going to say one thing your daughters remembered was daddy-daughter dates that you would do with them and dancing and
in Heber they had each year what was called a daddy date. And so I'd take the girls and go to that, and they had a dinner and then a dance afterwards. So we went to those each year, and that was an enjoyable time. And every year we took one of the girls to Salt Lake with us and went out to dinner, and so there were just the three of us. And they enjoyed that, and we did too, to get acquainted with them better on one-on-one. Because in the big family like we had, everybody together, you don't get a chance to be on a one-on-one basis. So we always did that. And we'd go to the Hotel Utah and have dinner. And I built a boat. I had the Explorer group as a calling in the church. And the Explorers always wanted to build something, so I bought a Chris Craft boat kit. It just came in a box, and we had to assemble it. And so that group of explorers and I assembled that boat, and it turned out to be a beautiful boat. And we even fiberglassed, excuse me, after we got it built. It was plywood on the outside, so we fiberglassed it. And we did a good job of fiberglassing on it so that it was a nice looking boat. And I bought a 50-horse Johnson motor, or Evinrude, I guess it was, so that it was powerful enough that we could pull water skiers. So I took the scouts, that group of explorers, Ramon Duke and I took them down on the river when they first built Glen Canyon Dam. And we had to drive 7 miles from Waweep, where now is the marina, up 7 miles on a dirt road to get to the river where we could put the boats in. And he had I had that 16-foot boat, and he had a 12 or 16-foot rubber raft with a motor on it. And so we took those scouts up the river, and the lake was started to fill, so it actually, I guess, would be the lake. But it took us all day to get up to Rainbow Bridge area. And we camped on the edge of the river there, and you had to walk from there 3 miles into Rainbow Bridge. And we camped there in the late afternoon, and back up on the shore, the lake had raised 3 feet in the night and was just about to our sleeping bags. So we moved way back up high, and then we hiked up to Rainbow Bridge. And some of the kids climbed up on top of the bridge, and some just sat down there and rested. Well, I decided I wanted to go back to camp and take a nap. So I went back to camp. But before I got to that point, I left out something. Some of the kids wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. And so 2 of them, finally I told them, I said, if you don't get out of bed, I'm going to throw you in the lake. So I threw George Holmes and I think Paul Broadbent in the lake in their sleeping bags. So they finally got them back out, and they hung their bags out to dry, and we hiked into Rainbow Bridge. Well, I decided then to go back to take a nap. So I went back to camp and was standing on the edge of the water, and unbeknown to me, those 2 guys had followed me down. And they slipped up behind me and shoved me into the lake, clothes and all. I had my wallet, I had everything. I went in shoes. So I got back out, and to this day, they razz me every time they see me about swimming with my clothes on. So we had fun with those scouts. But I took them water skiing from there up to Hole in the Rock. We left the rubber raft there and took, one of the Ryan boys, and I can't remember his name right off, water skied from Rainbow Bridge up to Hole in the Rock, which is a long ways. And when he finally, I stopped and let him down, knees were too weak, he could not get up on his feet. They had to pull him in the boat and lay him out there. And so he really overdid it, but didn't have any ill effects from it, but he got all the water skiing that he wanted. And then they took turns on the way back. Oh, we had a good trip, but when we got back, Ramon's motor would not start. So I had to tow him from Rainbow Bridge clear back down to where our cars were. But I might tell you a little bit about that now. In our supplies, I took a lot of pounds of bacon. I don't remember how many, but quite a few. And I had a 14-inch skillet that was 3 inches deep. And we took hash brown potatoes. I'd put 2 pounds of bacon in the pan, fry that. Then I'd dump the hash browns in and put the water with them and whatever it took, they were dehydrated. And I'd cook that pan full of potatoes for morning breakfast. And those guys would eat every bit of it. And Melvin Taylor was one of the, I would say, a misfit among the other kids. They razzed him, they teased him and everything, and his mother was afraid to let him go because she was afraid he might not make it home. And I told her I would take particular care of him, so I did. And that kid gained 5 pounds while we were on that for that week. And he ate everything he could get his, and she says he won't eat anything. And he ate everything we cooked and just had a glorious time. And I haven't seen him for 40 years. But he sent word with somebody to me once, not long ago, before I moved from Heber, how much fun he had on that trip. So it was a good trip for all the scouts. But when I had that boat, then we'd take the family out to Flaming Gorge and camp and boat on Flaming Gorge. And we did that a lot. And in 1964, I bought a 1965 Mustang. And we took that out to the Flaming Gorge, and Joyce drove it out. She was just a new driver, but she drove it out, and I drove the old car with pulling the boat. And so we were in the boat, and Joyce was on the shore. And I said, Joyce, did you lock the car? Yeah. And she had a swimsuit on, so I said, well, give me the keys so we don't lose them. Okay, so she tossed them to me. And they're at the bottom of the lake now. I imagine they're still there. But I did have an extra set. So we luckily were able to get the car going again, but I sure lost a set of keys. But my boat didn't have the power to pull me up on skis. And we went out to Flaming Gorge once as a family with Dr. Green and his family. And he had a hot rod boat with a big Corvette engine in it, and it would go. And I told him, I can't get up on my skis, so I don't know how to ski. And he says, I'll get you up. So he gave me the rope, and he gave that thing the gun, and I broke the rope. So he backed off and got 2 ropes, one in each hand. And when he pulled me out of the water, I went at least 5 feet straight up in the air and then come down head first. But I could see what I was doing wrong, not being able to get up. So the next time he hit me, I went up and on the skis. And he opened that boat up, and I don't know how fast we were going, but we hit some choppy water and I went down. And I turned every way but up, skipping on that water. Just like you throw a flat rock, I skipped along the top of that water till I finally sank. But I did learn how to ski. And then after that, my boat would pull me up because I was trying to hold the boat back instead of going with it and going up on my skis. So I learned to ski that way. Oh, we had a lot of fun. And then we'd take it, when we were in Heber, over to Rockport or down on to Deer Creek. But we couldn't water ski on Deer Creek at the time, so we'd go up to Rockport to ski. So we had a lot of picnics and boating time together as a family there. And all the kids loved that.
Want to take a break here?
Yeah.